we are excited about today. A little while ago, we were thinking through a series for September, and we decided we wanted to do some type of like a parenting type series. And so we started to wrestle with that as we figured school's back in session. Parents are starting to regain their sanity again because summer's over. So we figured, hey, let's talk to parents. But as we talked about that, what we always want to make sure of is that we don't miss everyone else. And so we began to kind of wrestle with this thought of what would it look like to create a series that helps us provide some practical application and truth to parents, but also does the same thing for everyone else. And so this is what we landed with is we're starting a series today called Foundations, Habits of a Healthy Home. And the important thing of this is there's a couple things we need to understand to be on the same page with before we move forward, because it's what's going to help us all understand that this isn't a series for parents, it's a series for you. And the biggest thing with that is by understanding what we mean when we say building a healthy home. So I started looking into this, like what are the definitions of a home? Because I think we all understand, for me, a home is more than the walls that you sleep within, right? And I think a home is also more than the blood family that you live with. And so I actually found this great definition, and it's funny because it actually came out of an essay written by a fifth grade boy. I found this little essay online by a fifth grade boy, and it was called What is a Home? And this is in short what he said. I just pulled this little clip, and I think it's beautiful. He wrote that home is a place where people can feel safe, welcomed, accepted, and loved. That's his definition of home. It's not about a physical place. It's not even about blood or family. It's anywhere where people can feel welcomed, safe, loved, and accepted. That's a beautiful definition. And for us, that's what we're going to work with over the coming weeks. Because what we want to do is we want to look at some habits. We want to look at some practices that we see through Scripture that are foundational to creating a healthy home. And the reason that that's important is because, again, this is not a series for parents. It's a series for you. What we're going to talk about is applicable in any season and structure of your life. It doesn't matter if you're single. It doesn't matter if you're divorced. It doesn't matter if you're empty nesters. Praise God for you. It doesn't matter what season of life God has you in. What God has in this series is for you. And I think there's two things that you're going to have to notice and realize throughout this. And it's these two things. One, when it comes to creating a healthy home, first is you have a part to play. In fact, you're going to play a little part. I need you to turn to your neighbor, and you're going to tell them, you have a part to play. That's a little better than I thought it was going to be. I'm not going to lie. Thank you. I had to coerce the last two experiences. You have a part to play. Again, it's not based on seasons. It's not based on anything except for the fact that you have breath in your lungs, okay? That is the standard for having a part to play in building a healthy home, is you have breath in your lungs. No matter how bad or funky it smells, you have breath in your lungs, so you have a part to play. The second thing is this: you have a part to play, and that means that you also have a choice to make. Turn to your neighbor, tell them, you have a choice to make. Here we go. Man, I am loving this. It's fantastic. You have a choice to make. We're going to look at 5 habits over the next 5 weeks that I believe, if you apply them, will help you lay the foundation for creating healthy homes in whatever environment you're in. But the choice is yours. You have a choice to make whether or not to play your part, whether or not to do what needs to be done to help create healthy homes, because Lord knows we need more places where people feel safe, welcomed, and loved. And if we can help build that, not just as a church, but as individual communities within our church, I believe our world will be better for it. So the first habit we want to look at today is a pretty broad stroke. And we see it come out of 1 John. In 1 John, we see the author writing to the church, and he says this. He says, 1 John 4:7, he says, "Dear friends, let us continue." That continue is important because it's pointing that they've been doing this, at least to an extent, but he wants to get a little deeper. He wants to get a little more intimate about the topic. He says, "Dear friends, let us continue to love one another. For love comes from God. So anyone who loves is a child of God and knows God." The first habit, which seems very broad and generic, but it's very foundationally important, is that we have to choose to love. But more specifically, I want to title it like this. The habit we're going to look at today is that we have to choose to lead with love. We have to choose to lead with love. Now, let me explain what I mean. I think it's easier for us to learn how to respond to things in love. Like, we can take that step back and figure out, was that loving, was that not loving, this and that. But to learn to lead with love is not about our response, it's about our character. To learn to lead with love, I'm not talking about your leadership skills at work or at home. I'm talking about the fact that when something leads you, what does it do? It goes before you. If we choose to pursue this habit of leading with love, it means that in every relationship and every interaction and every word we speak, every thought we have, every action we take, that love is the first thing to take its place. That first step will be a step that is rooted in love. Now, if we're honest, and I think we can be, we don't always do that. I can tell you, our kids don't always have the same urgency to get out of the house as I do. So sometimes I don't lead with love, I lead with frustration. Because I don't understand sometimes. Sometimes I lead out of anger, not towards them, but if someone hurts my family, watch out. The pastor's out of the table, right? Like, we're gonna fight. So sometimes I have to battle the reaction where I want to lead because I'm angry. I want anger to go before me, and that's going to base my reaction. Sometimes we lead out of jealousy. Somebody has something we want, they've achieved something we want to achieve, obtained something we want to obtain, and so we lead out of jealousy. Sometimes we lead out of pride. There are a lot of things that take the place and lead our actions. What I want to challenge us and encourage us is that if we want to play a part in creating healthy homes, we've got to learn to lead with love. We've got to learn to allow love to be the first response to everything that happens, no matter what it is. So what does that look like? This morning, I want to look at a story in the Old Testament of a family in which one of the sons, I think, demonstrates pretty dramatically but incredibly what it looks like to lead with love. It's the story of a young man named Joseph. Anybody heard of Joseph? Joseph in the coat of many colors. We got a few people in here. I love it. Joseph in the coat of many colors. So Joseph is a story in the Old Testament in the book of Genesis. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. It literally means in the beginning. And Genesis, through its 50 chapters, kind of paint a picture of the beginning of everything. The beginning of time and creation, to the beginning of man, to the beginning of community with man, to the first fall, and the beginning of sin and that struggle. Genesis describes the beginning of everything that humanity faces. And in it, we see this story. Joseph was one of the younger sons of a man named Jacob, but he was a favorite son. That's where the coat of many colors comes in. Any favorite kids in here? Oh, come on, all the babies can raise your hand. You know you're the favorite. Like, I'm a baby or a favorite, 100%. We can argue all day long, but it's not true. We're the favorites. So Joseph was clearly one of the favorites of his father. His father loved him in a unique way because he had him at a very old age. And so he looked at it as a very special bond. So that's where he gave him the coat of many colors. The brothers, though, got a little tired of the favoritism. And to top it all off, Joseph began to have these dreams in which he would see his family, if you were, bowing at him. And he was being put in places of leadership and as provider for his family. And where his family wrestled with it, even his father rebuked him at once, but then it says that his father considered these things. He thought about what God might be saying and doing. But the brothers became jealous. And one day as they were out in the field, the brothers decided they had had enough, and they threw him in a pit to leave him for dead. One brother found a little bit of grace left in his life and decided, well, let's not leave him for dead. Let's just sell him as a slave. And this begins the journey of what we know as Joseph's life. He's sold into slavery, and we see this constant back and forth of finding favor and then being hurt. And so in his midst of being a slave, he finds favor and raises up to be a head of a house. And then he's accused of a crime he doesn't commit, and he spends time in prison. And while he's in prison, he has the chance to get out by helping someone, but that person forgets about him and just sees to his own life. And then finally, it turns around and he's let out of prison, and he becomes second in command to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, which at the time would have been the most powerful man in the planet. He becomes number 2. He's put in charge of the town. He's put in charge of the country. Most importantly, he's put in charge of all the rations of all their provisions because a famine swept over the land. And in the midst of Joseph's life and battling the ups and downs, in chapter 45, we see him put in a unique position. Joseph, being Pharaoh's right-hand man, his number 2 in command, He's put in charge of all the rations, so people are coming to him in the middle of the famine asking and trying to purchase and trying to receive rations. And a group of young men show up. And who is it? It's his brothers. The irony is that when he sees them walk in, he immediately knows who they are, but his brothers don't recognize him. Have you ever run into that awkward moment in the store, right? Like you're walking through the aisles of Publix, you see someone who you know you don't want to see, so what do? You duck tail and you leave. Like you'll drive across town to go to a different Publix to make sure you don't see that person again. But he confronts it and sees it, and he deals and interacts with them, and it leads to a moment to when he has to make a choice. He has to realize the position he's in and the choice he has as to how he'll respond to him. And I love this. This is what we see in chapter 45 of Genesis, verse 1. It says, Joseph could no longer stand it. He can no longer stand the tension. He can no longer stand the fact that his brothers who sold him into slavery are in front of him and they don't know that he's even there. It says that he could take it no longer. There were many people in the room, and he said to his attendants, "Out, all of you." So he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. Then he broke down and wept. He wept so loudly the Egyptians could hear him. And word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. "I am Joseph," he said to his brothers. "Is my father still alive?" But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. "Please, come closer," he said. So they came closer, and he said again, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery." If you're the brothers, this is about to get uncomfortable, right? Like, we're caught, we're found out, he survived. Crap. Like, what do we do? He's like, "I'm your brother, remember the one you sold." Yeah. But it takes a turn here. He says, "I'm your brother, the one you sold into slavery, but don't be upset. And don't blame yourself for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here." He says, don't be upset with yourself. Don't be angry with yourself for selling me to this place. For it was God who sent me here before you so that I could preserve your lives. He goes on and they carry on this conversation, and it ends with this embrace between him and one of the younger brothers and then all of the brothers. And it begins to lead down this path of reconciliation. But what's awesome is it starts with that moment. It starts by Joseph choosing to lead with love. There's two things that we learn from his action here. The first is this: when we choose to lead with love, we choose to see the person over the problem. When we choose to lead with love, we choose to see the person over the problem. When his brothers stood there before him, he didn't see the jealous and angry ones. At some point, he didn't see the ones who betrayed him. He didn't see the liars, the deceiters. He didn't see the murderers. He saw his brothers whom he missed. He saw the sons of his father whom he loved. He saw family. He saw potential for peace, for reconciliation. He didn't go to rub this in their face. He actually consoles them instead of condemning them. He says, "Don't worry. Don't be afraid. Don't feel bad. I'm okay. This is where God wanted me." We have to choose to see the person over the problem. If we admit it, we respond differently to different people, right? We all do this. I'm not like backing you into a corner. It's like, "Ha, gotcha, sinner." No, we all do this. We all struggle with responding to people differently. For example, I know like we have a daughter and a son. I'll admit that even when Reagan was 2, I responded more harshly to him. There was something about him being a boy and her being a girl. And I just, as a father, I had to watch that and check that with myself to make sure that I'm responding and loving them equally and differently, but equally. For another example, when I was in college, I wasn't always the most like peaceful, relaxed driver. I'm still not, but I'm getting there, right? Like every year it's an inch forward most of the time, right? And so I was leaving church one day of all places, and I'm getting on the highway, and this golden Chevy Malibu cuts me off on the on-ramp. Now, I'm okay if you cut me off, but what do you not do next? See, everybody knows this. It's common human kindness. If you cut me off, it's fine, but speed up. But this gold Chevy Malibu cuts me off and slows down, and at this point, I'm ready to go. So I get as close as I can to that gold bumper, and I'm riding up to the highway because, again, it's the highway. You're supposed to speed up. They're going fast up there. And as soon as I get to where it's not even the lane, right, so the double lines, I jerk over, I shift gears, and I speed up next to it. I'm going to give them what for, right? I'm getting the meanest look I have on my face, and I'm ready. I'm gonna get next to him, and then I'm gonna cut him off, and then I'm gonna slow down, right? Like, I'll show you what slow on the highway looks like. I pull up next to him, and I look over, and I realize that I recognize the face. Well, see, I forgot to tell you, where I went to college is also where my grandparents lived. And that sweet little face in the car next to me was Meemaw. Like, I would rather have seen Jesus in that car, okay? Like, I mean, man, I've never changed a response and an emotion so quick. Downshift the gears, hit the brakes, probably caused an accident and got off the highway as fast as my little truck would go. And prayed that Meemaw never saw me. And she didn't. At least she didn't say she did. It's crazy how quickly my response changed when I saw the person instead of the problem. When I saw who it was and the fact that that person meant something to me, my response changed. If we want to lead with love, we've got to learn to see the person, not the problem. Because understand, there's two things you need to understand about seeing the person over the problem. The first is that they're two different things. This is something that is hard to grasp for a lot of people. But the person and the problems they cause are not the same thing. They're different. And so in order to respond properly to them, you have to treat them separate. You say, that doesn't make sense. I know it doesn't. They caused the action. They told the lie, so how do I not see the liar when I see their face? They caused the pain. How do I not see the abuser? How do I not see the accuser? How do I not see the person who left me? To be very blunt and pastory, because Jesus didn't see that in you. When we talk about the reality of leading with love, it means that we see the person separately from the problem. Which means we avoid labeling them. We avoid making them what their mistake is. The mistake is not worth saving. The person is worth saving, but you can't save them unless you remove the mistake from them. You can't see someone for the love that they require, not deserve, but require, unless you look past the problem and at the person. When your child disobeys you, do you see the disobedience? Or do you see your own image in the face standing before you? When we sinned, Jesus didn't see the sin. He saw his own image in the person before him. And he said, I can save the person by solving the problem. And that's why he came. He didn't come waiting for us to be perfect. He didn't even come waiting for us to acknowledge the fact that we needed it. He didn't label us by the mistake we made. He came to save us from the mistakes we made. Because he loved the person over the problem. If we want to lead with love, we've got to change how we see the people around us. And then we've got to change how we see the problem. If we lead with love, it will help us find a peace no matter the circumstance. Because if we lead with love, what will happen is we'll begin to understand that God is bigger than the problem at hand. That God is bigger than the problem at hand. This is what I mean by that. In verse 5, we see the strongest foundational truth that you will see in this story. One of the strongest you'll see in the book of Genesis. It's when Joseph says this. He says, don't be upset and don't be angry with yourself for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here, ahead of you. He goes on to say this multiple times throughout their interaction. What he's doing is he's understanding that the key to leading with love is that no matter who the person is, we have to accept the sovereign direction of God in our life. And if we accept his direction, then you have to understand that there is no action a person can make that will change the destination God has planned for you. Now understand, there are decisions you can make to keep you from getting there. But when it comes to the people around you, there is nothing anyone can do to divert or derail the direction and destiny God has for your life. Joseph looks at him and says, don't worry about it. I ain't mad at it. God wanted me here. He just used your mistake to put me here, but he wanted me here. It's not your fault. I'm supposed to be here. Man, when you can look at it like that, you can see past a lot of problems because you can see the plan God has for your life. And you can see the reminder that the plan is greater than the problem. But it's not easy. It's not easy to look past the person who caused the hurt and created the situation and the circumstance. It's easy to use this example when it's our kid that tells a lie, when it's our spouse that makes us mad. But what about the real struggle? What about a moment like Joseph's, when the people he loved the most sold him into slavery and left him for dead? Romans 8:28 is a verse that we love to quote. It says, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love him. Now, we love this quote. We love this verse because we can look at it and with confidence say, it's okay, whatever happens, God can work it out for good. And you're right. But pay attention to the verse. God can work all things for the good of those who love him. 1 John 4:20 says, if someone says, I love God, but hates his fellow believers, he is a liar. You want God to use it for good? Forgive the one who caused it. God can't use what you want to let go of. He can't redeem what you're still running with. I truly believe the reason God used everything that happened to Joseph, from his brothers selling him to slavery, to being falsely accused and forgotten in prison, to put him as the second most powerful man in the world, wasn't just because he was favored, but because he forgave. Because he did not hold the blame over the person. He held the blessing that God had waiting for him. God can redeem everything bad and turn it for good if you love him. He who says he loves God but hates his brother is a liar. You want God to work it for good? Let it go. Offer forgiveness. Forgiveness will lead to reconciliation, and reconciliation to unity. And through the unity of believers, God can do extraordinary things. It's not an easy thing to swallow. It hits you like a 2x4 sometimes. But it's truth. God worked everything for good in his life because he walked faithfully, forgiving his brothers. He led with love. When we lead with love, we see the peaceful, not the problem. The second thing is that we choose to take the first step. His brothers didn't even know it was him, let alone were they ready to ask for forgiveness. In fact, you don't even see that they do quite yet, but he offers it. See, what we're often tempted to do is to just say, this time I'm not moving. Have you ever been here? You ever gotten in a fight with your spouse or with someone you care about, someone you know, and you hit that moment of saying, you know what, this time? Nope, I'm not moving. I'm sitting right here. You can come to me. I mean, like, I'm preaching at myself. I probably did that this week, like, no lie. And when I do it, like, I physically sit down on my couch and pout like a child. But can we acknowledge how childish that is? You want to know something? We want to keep just throwing 2x4s? Jesus wouldn't have come from heaven yet if he was waiting on us. Leading with love doesn't wait on the person to acknowledge their need for love. It just takes the step. It takes the first step. It breaks the ice. It says, I'll swallow the pride. I don't care. Because this isn't about a win for me. It's about a win for us. And if I'm willing to step towards you, then maybe you'll experience the love that it resides in me. Because see, here's the important thing. 1 John 4:19, we go back to it. It says, we love each other because he first loved us. Sit with this. When it comes to the love of God, if it's in you, it's on you. Let me explain. If the love of God is in you, the responsibility to give it is on you. It ain't the person sitting next to you's responsibility. It's yours. We love because he first loved us. He did not wait for us to acknowledge his need for forgiveness. No. He hung on the cross saying, Lord, forgive them. They don't know what they do. He didn't wait. When we lead with love, we take the first step because the step is needed. If the love of God is in you, the responsibility to give it is on you. Now, if the love lives in them too, the responsibility is on them too. Maybe on a great scenario, you'll meet in the middle. But don't wait on them. You're responsible for what? What we say at the beginning? Your choice. It's your choice if you'll take the first step or not. It doesn't mean it's an easy step. It's a painful step. But if it's in you, it's on you. Try taking the first step with your kids. When you respond in anger and go and asking for their forgiveness. You want to wreck a child's life? Have their parent go ask them to forgive them. You don't think that will sit with them for a long time? You want to see the world shake and change? Be it. Do what's uncommon. Take the step. Lead with love. Make the phone call today that you've been hesitating to take. Some of you don't have the number anymore because you erased it because you were angry. Find it. Offer it. If we lead with love, it means we will take the first step, and that's okay because love always goes first. God says that he is a God of grace and truth. Grace is before the truth. He's going to extend the love always first. He will always lead with love. And the beautiful thing about that is when it comes to love, the reality is our extension of love is not a reaction to a person's action. It's not something we give them because they deserve it or because they earned it. That's a cheap carnival prize, and that's not love. Our love is extended as a response to the love God's given us, not what the person deserves. It's a perspective switch. When we lead with love, we take the first step. We could go on about the applicable things, but I think it's important that we also know what the outcome is. When we choose to lead with love, it means that we see the person over the problem. It means that we're willing to take the first step no matter the situation. And some incredible things happen when we do this. The first thing is this. In Genesis chapter 50, we see the close of our story. Jacob, the father, has passed away, and so Joseph and the brothers have taken him back to where they came from and have buried him. Then it says that they're all traveling back to Egypt, and it says at this point the brothers get scared. Because what they're thinking is, Dad's not here anymore, so it's about to go down. You ever had that with your siblings? Like as soon as mom and dad leave the house, it's like World War II. Like this is what, my daughter's raising her hand. We don't leave you by yourself. But it's true. They thought that now that Dad was gone, he was going to reveal his true colors. The reality is he had already forgiven them. This just shows you that they hadn't accepted it. They hadn't received it yet. So they weren't peaceful about it yet. He was. Isn't that the reality with Jesus? Like if you did not know this, if you've never experienced the love of Jesus, let me help you understand this. He's not on the cross anymore. He's not waiting to forgive you once you ask for forgiveness. It says the debt has been paid. It's not being paid. It's already paid. All you have to do is pick up the receipt. Say, I accept. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to do anything for it. You just have to pick it up and walk away in peace and happiness. He had already given the forgiveness to his brothers. They just hadn't received it yet, so they were afraid. he responds to him, says, don't be afraid of me. That's verse 19. Am I God that I could punish you? You intended harm for me, but God intended it all for good. This goes back to what we talked about. He brought me to this position so that I could save the lives of many people. So don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children. So he reassured them by speaking kindly to them. When we lead with love, we open paths that were previously closed. When we lead with love, we open paths that were previously closed. When we lead with love, for Joseph, he opened paths to peace, to forgiveness, to reconciliation, to being a family again that were previously closed. For a lot of us, when we open the door and lead with love in someone's life, it might open a path for them that they had not walked down yet. For some, if we're willing to lead with love, it's going to be an extraordinary, almost difficult to receive kind of love at times because it's so random and it's so unexplainable. But what that will do is that will open a door for them to actually experience the love that Jesus has for them. Because see, here's the thing that we have to realize about a lot of people. A lot of the people in your life, they struggle to express love because they've never experienced love. That's where we separate the person from the problem. It's not them. It's the problem that they have not experienced the love of God yet. If you've never experienced a medium rare ribeye from a Texas cattle, you don't understand why my mouth salivates when I drive by cattle on a farm or a ranch. You can't understand because you haven't experienced it. But when I see people meet Jesus, I understand the emotion because I've experienced the emotion. You remember the emotion when you met Jesus. You can remember the weight lifting, the chains falling, the freedom that is found in an instant. You can remember these things if you've experienced it. I don't hesitate. I say boldly that if you don't remember the experience, maybe you've never actually had the experience. Because it's not a forgettable one. You can remember your first kiss. You can remember your first favorite meal. So if you can't remember the day you met Jesus, I'm not trying to make you doubt it, but I'm trying to help you be confident in it. Maybe, just maybe, what you met wasn't him. If you can't express it, maybe it's because you haven't experienced it. We had a student, I'm going to start wrapping up. We were student pastors for 14 years, my wife and I. And we faced a lot of tough students. We didn't work in a lot of poor communities, but what I've learned is that broken is broken. It just looks different in different places. And we had one student, and I love him to this day. He actually just texted me last week, and we talked a little bit. But we had a rough start. He was a tough kid, a trouble kid, and we had a lot of confrontation. And there was one day we were at camp in Colorado, and he had gotten into it with a student, and I'll admit, I treated him different. I was harsher on him. I probably shouldn't have been, but I was. And we got at it with each other. And we're nose to nose, and this is the only time in my life where I thought this 16-year-old is going to punch me in the face. Like 100%, I was putting money on it at that point. And he finally stormed away, and as soon as he did, man, just the Spirit just hit me. It's like, what are you doing? So I tracked him down, and I set him down, and we began to talk, and as I'm trying to apologize and make things right, and I told him I'm sorry, the response I got broke my heart. Because the response I got was not, it's okay, don't worry about it, I forgive you. The response I got was, don't worry about it, I'm used to it. I thought about that. I said, man, the reason this kid is where he is, it's not him. It's the fact that he's never experienced the love of God, so he doesn't know how to express the love of God. What he expresses is hate and disappointment and judgment because it's all he's experienced. And all I did was just stack the dominoes up. So we had some hard conversations, and thankfully we got to rejoice in him giving his life to Jesus that week. And at the end of the week, this proud kid, he'll probably watch it later, and I love him, stands up in the middle of our church time with 250 of his peers, and in tears just begins to apologize to people one by one. For the first time, he was able to express love because he finally experienced true love. He had a great mom, he had a great dad. I know them, they're awesome people, but that's not the love of God. He finally experienced the love of God, and so immediately he was able to express the love of God. You can't express what you've never experienced, but when you do, you open paths for people to experience the same thing. You open paths for people to experience the love of God. You open paths for people to experience the love of community. That's a big one. I'm not a natural community person. After days like this, I'm going to go home and not see anyone for a good 24 hours, okay? But I know I need it. And I don't just need it. We open our home, everywhere that we've ever been student pastors, there was probably 10, 15 keys floating around in teenagers' pockets to our house, just because that's what we wanted to do. If we could create a home where they could feel safe, loved, welcome, and accepted, we were okay with that. The beautiful thing about building healthy homes is it's not seasonal. It doesn't matter where you are in life, age or demographic, it's not seasonal. It's not an option. It's a calling to live your life with people, to invest in people, to call them alongside of you. I know this to be true because I've seen it in the people I love. My sweet Meemaw, who I tried to cut off the road. When she was losing her mind, sitting at 96 in a hospital, not able to get out of bed, her only thought was, I'm alive because God's not done with me yet. There must be someone here who needs to know who he is. If you are breathing, you're not done. There's a call in our life to express the love that God gives us. And when we do that, it opens paths that aren't there before. The last thing as we close, verses 22 and 23, it says, so Joseph and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt. Joseph lived to the age of 110. He lived to see 3 generations of descendants together. When we learn to lead with love, we will leave a legacy that lingers. When we choose to lead with love and create a healthy home and a healthy culture and environment, we will leave a legacy that lingers past us. Because it's not a legacy that's about a person. See, when a legacy is built on a person, when the person goes, so goes the legacy. You see this with sports teams. When an incredible coach leaves, the team goes down and their winning streak and everything goes away. When a player gets hurt or retires, the team often ducks down and goes. When you build a legacy that's based on culture, it will linger past you. He was able to build a legacy because the legacy was already built. Because consider, when you look at how Joseph was able to love, he was able to love because his father Jacob had loved him. His father Jacob was able to love because his brother Esau, whom he had betrayed, showed love. Esau was able to love because his father Isaac showed him love. Isaac was able to show love because his father Abraham had showed love, and Abraham experienced love from God the Father. Do you see where this is going? When you walk and lead with love, it will linger behind you. People will experience it, and they will want to share it. Joseph's story didn't stop when he passed away because it wasn't his story. It was God's story. It's the same with us. God has called us to build healthy homes. God has called us to create culture and community in which people feel safe, welcomed, loved. The only questions are, will you recognize your part to play? And will you choose to play it? Will you choose to be a part of building that kind of a culture around you? Or will you stand aside? As we close, just a quick thing to think about as you respond. Some of you are struggling to understand this, and I think it might just be because you've never experienced this. And maybe the step you take today is a step into grace. So you might have come for encouragement today, but what you need is salvation. The brothers went to Joseph to get grain, and they received grace. Maybe that's why you're struggling, is because you need to experience the love of Jesus. And I'm going to lead you through that. In fact, we're going to pray this out. If you've never received the love of Jesus Christ, if you've never had that moment and you know that moment because you remember that moment, then let today be your day. We have a saying that we believe every day is someone's one day. Maybe today's your one day. And if that's you, what I want you to do at this time is you can pray to yourself, you can pray out loud, but just pray this with me. Say, Jesus, I believe in you. I believe that you died on the cross to save me. I believe that if I confess and repent of my sins, that you will forgive them. And that you will come into my life and be my Lord and Savior. Jesus, I'm sorry. Come into my life. Be my Lord and Savior.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today. And if our ministry has been a source of encouragement for you, let me encourage you to do two things. Number one, share it with a friend who needs hope. That would make a big difference in their life. Secondly, share it with us. We would love to hear your story. You can send us an email at amen@bridgechurchfl.com. And finally, if you'd like to partner with us financially as we bring hope both locally and around the world, you can do that directly through our website, bridgechurchfl.com/give. And thank you for letting us be a part of your spiritual journey.